Life gives us moments when we have the opportunity to make a choice. And what we choose has the potential to change our lives forever. Join us now for another inspired episode of The Breakthrough. And now, please welcome the creator and host of the show, Jessica Dugas.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Breakthrough Show, your weekly dose for inspiration, changing how you look at and live your life. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I'm super excited that you're here with us for another episode today. On today's show, I'm going to be joined by my good friend and fellow energy practitioner, Laura Mazzotta is here. She's going to be sharing about her personal healing journey, so you don't want to miss that. I just love having the opportunity to connect with her because we have so many similarities. But first up for you on the show, as you know, this season we've been spending a lot of time with entertainers in the first part of the show, which I've just enjoyed so much. And we've got a new kind of entertainment on the show for you today. It's going to bring us back to, when we were little and we'd go to the library and have story time. Did anybody else do that? We're gonna be doing that today as we welcome the author of a seriously entertaining series of stories called Wildly Inappropriate Stories for Children. Why do we want that? We're going to find out, but please welcome my guest, Will Blaine, to the show today. Welcome, Will.
It's good to be here.
It's exciting to have you on today because we've had some singers, we've had some musicians on the show, and I like that we're going to have a little story time. So everybody should grab a beverage and, sit Indian style on the floor and and listen to the story, right?
Yeah. I really would like to do that as soon as everything opens back up from the coronavirus. We can get around to some libraries and things like that. I think that'd be pretty fun.
Yes, absolutely. That would be great. Well, start us off today and share with us something that's bringing you joy in your life right now, Will.
Well, I met some Russian-speaking people within my block. My wife and I speak Russian, and I gives me a little bit of happiness whenever I meet new Russian-speaking people, because it's not all that common that you meet a Russian-speaking person in the United States, but it happens that they live right there at the end of the block on the corner.
Wow, that is really interesting because I remember I was in a special program when I was in elementary school, and they had us learn Russian, and I was thinking to myself, we don't know, like nobody here speaks Russian, and it was just one of those. So it is more rare, I think.
Next to Spanish, it's the largest foreign language speaking population in the United States. So,
is it really?
I would not have thought that either. But if you go to places like New York City, parts of Florida, and larger cities, they have entire sections. It's like you have Chinatown. This is like Little Moscow, and the Brighton Beach area, for instance, in New York City. That was the basis of my first book, Vlad and the Vast Beach, is Brighton Beach in New York City.
That's exciting. That's neat to learn because I think, in school for the majority in the United States here, you have a choice between French and Spanish, and that's it, and so we don't think about other languages. We homeschool, and one of my sons is taking Japanese. Right. So it's nice that they get to kind of pick what they want being at home, but we don't think about other languages sometimes. So that's we learned something new on the show today, you guys. That's exciting. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Will. Did you always want to be an author? What inspired you to write this series?
I've never really wanted to be an author per se. I mean, I've never really thought about that in that way. However, I've always written. I've always written poems or stories or something like that ever since I can remember. And I don't know, it's been a couple decades ago. I decided, this is kind of ridiculous. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm never really going to do anything with it. So I threw all my stuff away. I had it all written down in notebooks and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm done with this segment of my life. So, I got rid of everything. And then I got married to my wife. And for our first anniversary, I wrote her a poem. And I put it in a leather journal and had the blank pages and everything. And I wrote her a poem for our anniversary. So she really liked it, obviously, and then I started, getting into writing some stories and things like that, and then I would share them with some friends and some workmates and relatives and different things like that, and they're like, "Hey, do you have any more stories? I started getting requests for it, and then they were like, hey, could you email this to me? And then finally somebody suggested that I put some of my stories up on Amazon. So that's when I started taking it more seriously, and it got me out of the hassle of having to send emails every day to different people that were wanting to read some of my stories. And they are entertaining. They're technically kids' books, yes, but they're geared for families, parents, even older kids, uncles, aunts, grandparents, all that kind of thing. Yeah.
I was going to ask you now for me as a parent, I'm sitting here looking at the title of this series going wildly inappropriate stories for children. Why on earth would I want to give my children have enough ideas on their own? Why do I want to give them more inappropriate things in their mind? So tell us about that.
Yeah, so the stories are definitely not intended for impressionable children. So all of these stories in the Wildly Inappropriate Stories for Children series are about the things that children do naturally that their parents don't want them to do. They're, like wandering away from their mother during a day at the beach. That's what Vlad and the Bass Beach is about. Sticky fingers from jam. The young child gets up early in the morning and decides to make himself breakfast, and he chooses to eat blueberry jam. You don't want your kids doing that. The story that I'm going to read you today is called The Brat with a Bat. I wrote this some time ago, and one of my friends that I was reading it to has a 5-year-old son, and within minutes of me reading the story, he had gotten a stick and was going around his house hitting things. So it's not intended for young impressionable 5-year-old kids. Once they get to be get a little more reasoning ability, I'm guessing 8, 9 years old, maybe. It depends on your kid, obviously. But it's not something that you would want to have your young children read without some parental guidance there. Right. Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it because you had shared one of the stories with me when we met initially. I could see it being really a good conversation piece for a family unit to say, okay, well, this is why we don't do this, but also I thought it would be so entertaining for older children, because I was thinking of my son who's going to be at the time of this recording, he's just turned 19, and he's graduating high school. And so as kind of like that, a fun gift between a parent and an older child to say, like, dude, this is what we went through with you.
And that's exactly true. These are very relatable stories. I think every parent has gone through this, or every parent that has a kid has probably had them do one of these things. That's like one of the worst fears I had as a parent was when my daughter was young, is her wandering away at the grocery store or something like that. And I would always insist that she hold my hand. I was like, she didn't like it at the time, but yes, you have to hold my hand, because I was afraid not only she'd wander off, but maybe somebody would snatch her up, or you don't know what's going to happen. So that's like really deep inside me, that fear. And it was funny too, because she got to be like 10 or 12 years old or something like that, and she's like, Dad, do I have to still hold your hand? And I was like, yes, absolutely. You're going to hold my hand. She goes like, Dad, I'm 5'7". I'm not, nobody's going to snatch me up. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, maybe that's true. But she's 27 years old right now, and I still worry that something bad's going to happen. Likely it's not, but that's what parents do. They are concerned about their kids.
Right. Now, has she read these stories? What does she think of them?
She has. She gives me very honest feedback. No, and it does help. I have a circle of friends and family that reads my stories, and they give some honest feedback. And frankly, I've done lots and lots of rewrites because of ideas that they floated and things like that. So, yeah, I really do appreciate the ones that I have in my inner circle that review my material before I publish it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that mine are, anytime I ask for their, and I ask for their opinion a lot because I know they're going to be really honest with me.
Right.
Whereas an adult, depending on your relationship with them, they might sugarcoat it a little bit. They might, depending on what they want from you too. So the kids are going to tell you exactly, and they don't care,
Right.
so that's
Yeah.
really
She
helpful.
pulls no punches.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm really excited for you to share one of these stories with us today with our audience. So, here to read one of the wildly inappropriate stories for children, here's Will Blaine reading Brat with a Bat.
Yeah. What is this that my eyes see? Slender, metal, so shiny. I'll take a swing. No one will care. It won't hurt if they're unaware. To swing feels good from where I stood, in the middle of my living room floor. I heard the whoosh of the wind as the bat would descend and make contact with our front door. It left a dent in the door, but much like before, I continued to swing away. It was not that I planned, but the bat left my hand 'cause my grip had gone astray. The bat flew through the room and continued to zoom because I had opened the door. When it landed, it smashed a large pot, then it crashed to a table Mom used to adore. I picked up the bat, then calmly sat to survey the damage I'd done. As I looked all around, I imagined Mom's frown, but then again thought, that was fun. I tossed the bat in the air because I didn't care if I broke a thing or two. Look over there. It looks like a chair. It seems to be made of bamboo. I took a big swing and then heard the ping as my bat made contact with wood. The wood didn't move. I'll have to improve and swing harder in all likelihood. As I gave it a whack, it developed a crack and the leg fell onto the floor. Impressed with my style, I developed a smile. It snaked wryly, much like before. What to do now? I said to myself as I stepped slowly into the yard. I swung as I walked, but soon I balked. I saw a goat who was a diehard. The bully would bet anything, that's clear cut, so I decided to give it a try. He stood on hind legs and gave me a gaze. As I swung, I gave a war cry. I heard the sound of the ping, then thought, poor thing, but then looked at the end of my bat. I stood there amazed that Billy was not fazed by the violence of the impact. Now, I'm going to interject this that I do not endorse hitting goats in the head with a baseball bat, but I grew up on a dairy goat farm when I was growing up. The boy goats, the billy goats, are very aggressive. And this, if you hit them in the head with a baseball bat, it would do just that. So, yeah, I'm not endorsing this, but yeah, it was not intended to hurt the animals at all. All right, continuing. I continued on foot. I needed input to figure out what to smash next. I saw a small tree. It was right next to me. I focused my muscles and flexed. On the branches was fruit, the red glossy sort. I swung my bat hard, but I was too short. I threw my bat up, that is, up in the tree, and down came an apple, as fresh as can be. I threw the fruit up, then took a swing. The apple was smashed over everything. I was covered in sauce and sticky to boot. I should have thought better of smashing that fruit. But that didn't matter. I was okay. I was off to smash something, without delay. It didn't get far until it caught my eye, a brown paper object that wasn't that high. Should I just ignore it or give it a whack? I walked all around it and planned my attack. Now the queen was quite vicious, and so was her brood. No one remembers when she was in a good mood. In her domain, she eagerly sat, just waiting for a youth with a metal ball bat. I struck the first blow, and with hornets in tow, the savage queen from her nest started to flow. They covered my body from head to toe. From assaulting me fiercely, the queen would not slow. I looked back at my house in my agony, and I saw my dad jump from my balcony. He ran with great velocity to come to save his progeny. I was screaming and crying as my daddy arrived. He carried his girl away from the hive. The queen was still angry. She continued the attack, putting large welts all over Dad's back. As we jumped in the creek, she brought to a halt the horde of mad insects and their vicious assault. By the time we got home, my mom had arrived. We told her about the incident with the hive. Though she felt badly for my affliction, She was still very angry with the damage I'd done. Dad spoke to Mom softly in gentle, hushed tones. Then he walked to the deck made of old cobblestones. He started picking up pieces of smashed pottery. Then I knelt by his side, feeling camaraderie. I was stabbed to the heart, I have to confess, when I saw my daddy cleaning up my big mess. Though it hurt me a little to kneel by his side, I did it quite proudly, my sorrow implied. They taught me a lesson, the Queen and her crew. Because of my daddy, I've changed my worldview. In time, Mom forgave me, and I'm glad of that. Because of them, I'm no longer a brat with a bat.
Yay, I love it. I love that. I love that you interjected because we love the animals on this show. But it's one of those things though where, children can often make poor decisions, and they're just ultimately the majority are just trying to explore, and they're trying to figure that out. So I get, although it's sometimes, that part of the story can stun you for a minute there, it's something that I feel like, is something that could happen. Any of these stories that you tell are things that could happen. And so that's why I think it's such a good thing for parents to read. It's so, I could see it being like something that I would read, and I almost feel like reading it, I get like a badge of honor at the end or something. Like, I went through this with my children.
Well,
So
these stories are all loosely based on my own experiences too. I didn't physically hit a goat in the head with a baseball bat, but I've been butted many times by one, and
hmm.
I've been stung. I went blackberry picking with my mother when I was about 7 years old, and got into a hornet's nest and was stung. I don't know, something in the teens by hornets at the same time. So these are all things that I have experienced in my life, and I was not intending to be in those situations, but you find yourself in those situations,
Right.
and I think that's the way with most children. I've heard such and such a child is a bad kid because he got into so much trouble doing this, that, or the other. In reality, I think that children are just exploring their world and have not experienced things, and because of that lack of experience, they get themselves into situations that get them into trouble.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we all went through it when we were little, and our children are all going through it, or maybe our children are out of the house now and we went through that. And that's kind of like the cool thing that we've been discovering this season on the Breakthrough Show, is that we've got so many different parents on the show this season, from very different walks of life, very different backgrounds, but guess what? All of our children do the same crazy things.
They
So
do. They
it's
do.
something that we can all relate to in a time where I feel like so much separates us, that this is something that this crazy world of parenting is something that can bring us together.
Yes, that's certainly the case. I think that most people that are parents are going to experience these things. They probably lived through them themselves. They probably don't even remember half the things that they did when they were growing up, but their parents probably do.
Right, right.
So it's something that's very relatable, something that's very it's a thread that can bring many people in our society together.
Yeah. Well, tell us, so you've got, how many stories are in this series now, and do you have a plan for how many there will be, like, by the end of it?
Yeah, I sat down and kind of brainstormed. I have about 20 stories. I've written to completion about 10. Um, I don't know that I'm going to release all of them in single book format like this, but ultimately the plan is to write a very like a large book, kind of like an Aesop's Fables type thing, an illustrated book called Will Blaine's Big Book of Wildly Inappropriate Stories for Children. So that's going to contain probably the ones that are published, and some other ones as well in a large.
That is exciting. It would be fun, like I said, to have something like that you could. I feel like something that brings us together, and something that many of us can relate to. And I could even see it for a minute being like, a part of a book club for the moms, that are sitting there having their wine, going, "Listen, ladies, let me tell you some stories."
Right. Right.
I think you'd be great. Well, Will, thank you so much for coming on today and for entertaining us with one of your stories. And I just really appreciate you giving us some laughs and something to bring us together.
Well, I'm glad I can provide some humor for you, Jessica. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Well, be sure you guys check out the show notes so that you can connect with Will and also find out where you can buy your copies of Wildly Inappropriate Stories for Children. Vlad and the Bass Vlad and that listen, that is a tongue twister and I should have practiced. Vlad and the Vast Beach.
You got it.
And the tell us the other one, the Sticky Fingers.
Sticky Fingers from Jam.
Sticky Fingers from Jam. And is that one out yet?
No, not out yet. I've got, like I said, about 10 of them written that I just haven't released yet. I'm working with designers and some illustrators and copy editors, all that kind of thing. Just, feeling things out, looking for improvements and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Very exciting. So make sure you guys check out the show notes so that you can connect with Will and find out where you can get copies of your stories and keep up with Will so that you know when the new stories come out as well. And we'll be back in just a moment with our special guest today, Laura Mazzotta. Hey, Jessica Dugas here, creator, producer, and host of The Breakthrough Show. We have big goals here at the show in the desire to change the world one Breakthrough Show episode at a time. And honestly, we couldn't do it without you. We want to take this moment to give a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters for helping us to not only expand the show, but spread its message far and wide. If you're not a supporter yet, we would love to have you. You can choose any tier with tons of benefits at patreon.com/The Breakthrough Show. We can't wait to have you part of our Breakthrough Show family. And now back to the show. Welcome back to The Breakthrough Show. My special guest today serves women ready to explore holistic, alternative methods of healing and transformation as an expert therapist. She's a certified Akashic Records practitioner and Reiki healer, and she is the person we should go to when we're ready to take steps in our own healing journey. Please welcome my friend Laura Mazzotta to the show.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so glad you're finally here. Like, we've only been bouncing this back and forth for a long time. Since like season 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, like, that was 2018. How fast, like, it blows my mind how fast time goes every day.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's
crazy. That's how long we've known each other too.
I know.
Longer than
it's a little nuts. Yeah. I think it was either the very beginning of 2018 or maybe even, I don't know. I don't know where time goes. That's not what we're here for today. So I would love for you to start off by sharing with us something that's bringing you joy this week. What's something joyful you can share with us?
So what's bringing me joy lately is kirtan. Oh my goodness gracious. It is like making me so happy. I've realized over the past just like 8 to 10 days, how much listening to that on a loop keeps me in alignment, like all the time.
You have to fill the people in for anybody that doesn't know what kirtan is.
Yeah, so it's like singing chants is basically what it is. So it's chanting, and usually it's in devotion to a certain god or a certain goddess or something like that. But kirtan itself is like a call and response. So it's like you'll chant in a sing-songy voice. I love to sing just like you. Yeah. So it's chanting something, but then whoever's singing it sings it, and then you kind of respond with the same phrase back. So it's like an off and on kind of thing. But I don't know what it is about it, but it just like gets me right in my soul and lightens me up immediately and gets me into alignment. So I'm celebrating it.
Yeah. It's interesting because I did the first episode of my Project Joy podcast that I did for March. I talked about joy and faith, and I talked about growing up in the church, and one of the things that we always did in Catholic church was something very similar. There's specific services though, where we would have that sort of call and response kind of thing. And granted, it wasn't in another language or whatever. I mean, I suppose in the old church, of course, it was in Latin or something, but we weren't that fancy at our church, and it was in English. But it was still like something so powerful of that chanting and the call and response, and everybody sort of doing it together. And do you find that it's more powerful, like doing it with other people, or you still really enjoy it by yourself?
So I do find it's a lot more powerful with other people, but I've just been enjoying it by myself, just belting it out, and my children just make fun of me, and that's totally fine because I don't care because I'm so happy.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Exactly. So I would love for you to take us back to, how things were in your life before, just as you were coming to figure out who you are. You started out as a therapist, right? And tell us a little bit about that and what that time in your life was like.
So I've always known that I wanted to be a therapist. When my parents got divorced when I was 7, my mom took me to a therapist, and I loved her so much. She was like so gentle and sweet and kind and just held such beautiful, comfortable space for me. And I thought, this is what I want. Like, this is what I want to be for other people, And I've just always known that my whole life. And I tried on a couple different other things for size as a career, but it just didn't fit, And so I became a therapist about, I guess, almost 17 years ago. And I've worked in hospitals, and I've been in private practice primarily for the past 16, 17 years. And I love it. I mean, I've had a very successful private practice. I have very good relationships with my clients, and it's very fulfilling work. But then I got really sick.
And that's something that, like, that had to be so hard to be in something you really love, and then all of a sudden not feeling good and not feeling like you can really keep up with that.
Yeah. You know what? It was being a very good therapist is a huge source of my pride. Always has been. And I've always felt like one of my main roles as a therapist is to be a consistent, reliable presence in my clients' lives, because it's one of the reasons that they come to me, is because they haven't had much consistency or reliability,
right.
And they need that person in their life. So when I got to the point, and it actually started before I got sick. My mom got cancer, then within a week or 2, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. And so I was running back and forth with them, and so I wasn't as available. And there were all of these messages coming from the universe. Then I got pregnant with my 3rd child, and I was the sickest I've been in any of my pregnancies. So it was like all these things that kept making me have to step back from my practice. And it was very hard for me to do. I felt very guilty because I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not as here for these people, and this is my role. Like, that's what I had set up as a structure in my mind, it's like, I need to be consistent and reliable. So I had to really shift a lot of my mindset. And then I got sepsis. And that really knocked me down.
Yeah. Do you think that I know that that was your thing, to be consistent and reliable for other people. Do you think that something that led up to your sickness was maybe not necessarily being consistent and reliable to yourself?
Oh yeah, 100%. I was giving way too much. And that's why I say now, I am truly 100% thankful and appreciative that I got sick, that I have this illness chronically, and I'm very thankful because it has led me to more happiness, confidence, and peace than I ever thought that I would feel in my life. And it's because it forced me to set boundaries that I never would have set.
Right.
If I had been healthy, because I was like, no, I have to say no. Like, in the past, people would call me and be like, oh, I'm hurting and this, that, and the other. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm overfull by about 10 patients, but I'll take it. Like, I would just, and I was texting people and having access at all hours. And it was just, I was in savior mode, which was really more about me,
right?
than it really was about them, which wasn't good for them.
Right. And I talked about that with my son recently, who's gotten into he's got a little entrepreneurial bug in him. And he was talking, his notifications on his phone were going off all day long. And we're in this mode right now of trying to talk to the kids about how the circumstances around the house, even though they don't think so, they're really preparing them for real life, like things that'll happen. And I told him, I was like, look, if your phone was going off like that at a job and you kept answering other people, you would be fired. Your boss would not go for that. So we've got to figure something else out here. And I told him, I said, I'll be honest with you. I said, in the beginning of my journey, I never set hours for myself and I never unplugged. And what happened is, not only was that not fair to me, but I was showing my clients how I would be. And so as I've made this transition into stepping away from the computer and having better boundaries and all of that, it's been a transition period of people going, where are you? Is everything okay? Like, why aren't you there? Kind of thing, because that's what I taught them to expect from me.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Exactly. And it's funny because with my illness now, it cycles, just like yours, it cycles.
Yeah.
And so I find that a lot of times that cycle is very much aligned with, I have this new business also that I've started with the Akashic Records and the energy healing. And I can slip into sometimes that same old mentality because it's new, it's fresh, it's uncharted waters. And it's me feeling like, that imposter syndrome, almost like I need to prove myself that like I'm relevant in this world in addition to the therapy world. Right.
Right.
And so I would slip into that where I'm like constantly reacting to posts or responding to posts. And, and I've taken a big step back from being constant because it doesn't serve me. And if it doesn't serve me, it doesn't serve them, because I need to be that holding that space and that pillar of strength for myself and for them.
Right. I mean, and it's different now too with the social media world and so many people using social media as part of their entrepreneurship. The internet doesn't shut off. I mean, people are, it's open 24 hours. It's not like a brick and mortar business where you lock the door at the end of the shift. I don't know anyone that has a brick and mortar business that's literally open 24/7, other than like Walmart, which has a ton of employees. I don't know anybody that has a small business that is open 24/7, because that's impossible. And so why do we expect ourselves to do that just because it's online, it's social media, or a global business that's not a brick and mortar,
Yeah. And I think, some of it is success driven, some of it is money driven, but I also think that it can be very invigorating. Like it can be very addictive and kind of invigorating and fill you up in a lot of ways, which is good. But again, it almost, you can get dependent on that feedback from other people or that constant back and forth. And it's like, no. This isn't to fulfill. I mean, it fulfills me, but it's just not just for me. I want to be of service. That's the goal.
Well, and I mean, you talk about filling up too. I think that's so true that there's a lot of people that talk negatively about social media. And I've been adamant about that as well, that you can get so many positive things. But if you look at a glass and you fill up a glass and eventually you can overfill it. I mean, then you have a big mess because everything's everywhere. So just even thinking about things in that way, I think we have to create those boundaries and unplug and all of that fun stuff. But so tell us a little bit about what happened when you got sick. Like, what were some of the really low points for you around that area?
Ugh. So, I mean, it was definitely the most traumatic experience that I've ever had when I got sepsis, because I had no idea what was happening. I thought I might have a stomach bug. And it's the first time, I mean, I've called 911 so many times for like my patients and my clients, but for myself, never. And it was really scary and upsetting. What was funny is when they were carrying me away on the stretcher into the ambulance, I was feeling guilty because my husband's sister, his brother's wife, was in the hospital at the time, and his aunt was in the hospital at the time with a terminal illness. And so I felt like, oh my gosh, she's so stressed out about all these people, and now look what's happening. And I had a baby who was screaming from her crib, and I was scared out of my mind. I had no idea what was happening. Yeah. I didn't know if I was going to survive it. And the nurse told me when I got there that if I had called about 30 minutes later, they wouldn't have been able to do anything to help me. And so it was a huge moment for me. And then after that, I couldn't walk for about 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
And without collapsing. And I went back to the hospital multiple times in that time. And it was just so shocking. I mean, that's why it was a traumatic event primarily, right? Because it was so shocking. And I was like, what happened? Because prior to that, I had felt the healthiest that I had felt in a really long time. I'd felt really good. So this came out of the blue for me. And it was just it was this process of navigating balance for myself, of receiving help, of being vulnerable and really, really helpless for the most part. And so at that point, that's when I started turning to meditation, because I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do? I mean, I was bored out of my mind. I was like laying around at the time. I was so out of it. I was so out of it.
Right.
And so I was just like, all right, well, I guess I'll meditate. Because like even reading a book, I couldn't focus. I couldn't even watch a show because the stimulation of the lights through my eyes was literally laying there for months, you know? And so I was like, well, I guess I'll meditate. And it was beautiful for me because I was able to access this place that I had never accessed before, you know, within me. And yes, I had a lot of times when I cried a lot and I was very, very upset because my whole life was shifting and I didn't know what was coming, whether I was going to get better, whether I wasn't going to get better. I mean, all the doctors I went to were saying like, you're going to have this forever. And I mean, not sepsis itself, but the immunodeficiency, and I had some neurological damage from sepsis. So I have neuropathy. And, you know, and for me, when I went to the one neurologist and he said, you're just going to get worse. I just didn't believe him. You know, I was
like that.
Yeah. I was like, I just don't see that for my life. Like I'm a very spunky human. I have a very spunky spirit. And I'm like, I just don't see that for the rest of my life. And so I started researching, you know, a lot of other things. And I went to the holistic side and a lot of energy healing. And I tried, I mean, the list is endless. And that's when I found the Akashic Records, and it completely changed my life.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think, you know, in our society, we're taught a certain way, and many of us are taught a certain way, and we grow up a certain way that, you know, when we get sick, we go to the doctors and we do what they tell us to do, the end. You know, and I know that that's been such a huge part of my journey, like, and learning to listen to myself and trust myself, and to not just take, you know, the man in the white coat's last word for things, that I need to that I know my body. I mean, I live in it, and we take that lightly sometimes. It's a little too lightly. It makes me uncomfortable to think about how often, you know, I let someone else dictate what I should do with my body when I'm the one that lives in it, you know? And so was there a period of adjustment for you as far as, you know, as you were looking into these other, when you were saying, you know, no, I'm not going to just, you know, be miserable forever, and you started looking into these other things? Was that outside of your realm of how you had been taught? Like, was it an adjustment for you?
Oh yeah, big time, because I was a rule follower. You know, very, very type A, very by the book.
We are good girls here.
We are good girls. And I was always taught, like, yes, listen to the doctor, go make sure you're on time for your appointments perfectly. Like they were above me. You know, like they were somebody to be kind of looked at as an authority. And so for me, it felt like, and it was good actually that I went to 50, 60 different specialists during that period of time, because I was able to compare and contrast.
Right.
If I had gone to a couple, I would have been like, well, I have to do what this person says. And I have to, but there was such a disparity that was coming through. I mean, one person said, we think you have lymphoma. And the other person said, no, you don't. Just get a mouth guard. It's probably TMJ, you know? And so the level of extremes were so different that it was great for me, because I was like, oh, wow, like there's polarity in this world. And I get to decide, along with my husband. He was wonderful. I mean, he came with me to everything. And obviously this was very, very confusing. I was very confused for a long time. The doctors were confused. You know, they had no idea what was going on. And so it was almost better that it was confusing, because it did put me in a position to do, like you said, like I'm in my own body. I know what I feel. I know what my gut feels that I'm drawn to, you know, and I was able to decide that because there was stuff all over the place that was scattered. If there had been one path, I probably would have followed the rules.
Yeah.
You know?
Isn't that a beautiful realization? I mean, because I think a lot of times we think there's one path. Like I said, many of us grew up like that. You know, I grew up in the town where there was the Pfizer headquarters. So everybody that I knew was a scientist for Pfizer, a drug rep for Pfizer, somebody that had to do with that company. And it's to know, I mean, I think I want to be clear, and I always want to be clear on these episodes where we're talking about this, that we're not knocking the medical community at all. There is a time and place for traditional medicine, but it's like, when we are shamed into looking at other alternatives for ourselves, when we are shamed at saying this doesn't feel right to me, there's a problem there. And I really believe that we have such a long way to go in the medical community of being of just listening to the patients. And yes, you have a degree and you went to school, and that's fantastic, but we live in these bodies. You know, we can sense. And I think a lot of what you do as well, of encouraging people to tap into their intuition and to listen to themselves, that is the other side of the coin that we need to be teaching the patients about that as well. So I love that you've been able to not just use that process for yourself, but now you're helping other people with that process as well. So tell us a little bit about the transition, though, like as you started to heal yourself and go on this journey yourself, because neither one of us are done on this journey. We are healing and we are processing. And so as you've gone on this journey, when did you decide that you wanted to help other people with this same thing?
It's so funny because the way that you word that, I don't think I decided. Mm-hmm. Like it just came naturally. Yeah. Like I was like, I just have to share that. Like it just, I was like, I have to share this. Like it just, and I think for me, because it was so life-changing and it was so, again, a shock, like so surprising to me, because I was a huge skeptic, you know, when I came into it. And so I was just like, I feel a lot better. Why do I feel better? You know, like, I was on this call with this woman who was waving her arms around, and I'm like, what the hell did I sign up for? And then I'm like, but I feel a lot better, you know? And so it took many times of that for me to be like, I think this actually works, you know? Yeah. And then when I started to see how much I was shifting, I mean, not just physically, but as a person, how amazing I felt and confident, more confident than I ever felt in my whole life, you know, calmer and more energized, and just like, I was like, who is this person? I mean, I felt like an awakening. I really did. Yeah. And then I was like, oh my gosh, people need to know about this, because I was in such a dark space when I was sick. I mean, yes, I went in and out of feeling depressed and like questioning and confused, but for the most part, I was just confused and sedentary and just sitting in like heaviness, you know? And so I was like, I want other people to know about this. Like everybody needs to know that they don't have to just listen to this, you know? Right. And to what the doctors are saying to them, you know? To let them know that there's solutions out there. Right. You know, and that they're within them. Yeah. And you can access them no matter where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people, like I said, we have like a more of a traditional mindset when it comes to our health and, or what has been traditional in the past. And it's like anything else. It's like religion. It's like diet. It's like anything, to where it can be hard for us to have what we've always believed questioned. And there could be pride things that come up with that. Like, well, this is what I've always believed. Like I couldn't have possibly been wrong for all those years, you know? Right. So I think sometimes it's a pride thing that comes up too for people. So I love how you said, though, that it was natural, that it wasn't like a decision, because that's been so my journey as well. I don't think I ever said this is what I want to do for work. That it's just been that same feeling of, well, my life is changing. Other people should know about these things. So I love that has been your journey as well. So tell everybody a little bit about, I know you have many different things that you've explored, and as part of your healing journey, tell us a little bit about the things that work best for you. And I know one of those things is the Akashic Record. So if you could share with everybody what that is as well, for anybody that doesn't know.
Sure. So the Akashic Records are like a spiritual library in the clouds, and they're manned by guides, ascended masters, angels, loved ones that have passed. And basically we go through a ritual to open up your record. And when we do that, it's like they take the book of you off the shelf, and they have all the information in that book about your soul from its first incarnation until its last. So it's like Google for the soul, right? So you can type in any question into the Akashic Records and ask about your journey, about your life. You can get healing just by being in that space, because it's a very high vibration, high frequency space. So just sitting there and doing what I say, what I call a light bath, right? Where you just allow it to heal and shift the energy within your physical body, in addition to your energy field and your emotional field. Just naturally brings healing by being there. But you can also get answers about past lives, about like, oh, why am I so anxious? Or why am I, what's going on with this relationship with so-and-so, what purpose do they serve on my journey? And it's amazing how much it opens up your world to infinite possibilities, really.
Yeah, I think the Akashic Records have always been an interesting experience for me, because I'm really like, because of the upbringing that I had in the kind of church that I did, I've always been sort of a fan of the pomp and circumstance of things, of the ritual and the creating the space and all of that. And so that's really such a huge part of my life now. And I know that's that whole ritual of opening the records and closing the records and doing the same thing. There's even so much, I think, peace in that process. That is really interesting. What do you feel like the biggest thing is you've learned in this process of accessing your own records?
So this ties into partially to me, quote unquote, deciding to share this with others, is that it's made me much less indecisive. Mm-hmm. I was always more wishy-washy, because, I'm a classic social worker. Like right. Exactly. And
where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. What's good for you?
Exactly. Well, and I can always see like multiple sides of every situation. I'm
yes.
I can see that. I can understand that.
How very air sign of us.
Exactly. Yes. And then it leaves me in this like position where I'm like, I'm not sure. So it's made me very decisive, which I think has helped my confidence a lot. And that's where it helped me know that I needed to share this too, because I saw the impact, like how much more effective I felt as a therapist. Like I said, I've always been a very successful therapist, but I was like, wow, I literally doubled my impact just in terms of my level of insight, tuning in, and just my energy being shifted, the shifting in my clients that I was able to see after I started this work. And I was like, wow, I need to start incorporating this, because it's creating change. It's a ripple effect. And so it was the ripple effect, but for me, it was decisive, because I accessed those records and it's like, this is what's best for your soul journey. Like up there, they know a hell of a lot better than us humans do. Right. And it's so funny, because like this client that I've seen for over a decade, I was trying to guide her in a certain area of her life. And I'm like, yeah, we need to do this and this and this. This makes the most sense for you. And then we accessed her records and they're like, yeah, no. Like, this is what's best for you. And I'm like, see, I mean, even me, being very good at what I do as a human, I don't have access to infinite knowledge or knowing what her soul path is or where she needs to be in 50 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's what I love about it. And the other piece is that when I would get nervous about making a decision that might not be in someone else's best interest or in my best interest, I can trust that I'm not going to get anything from the records that is not ready to be integrated at the time. So it's a very safe space also to get that information. So I felt like, okay, like this is good. I don't have to worry that, I'm sending somebody on this path that who the hell knows where it's going to end up.
Right, right. It's a very it can be a very new thing for people to that maybe have a very religious background, or just just we're not don't have no idea what you're talking about. And so have you gotten any pushback from anybody, like anybody that really don't understand or don't feel like maybe it's too woo for them? Have you had that at all?
So I've had some people that are skeptical,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. A couple people who have asked, does this interfere with my upbringing as a Catholic or this, that, or the other?
Right.
So my answer to that is that it's the same space. It's all the same, all of this energy work or spiritual work, in my opinion, is all coming from the same space. It's coming from the Akash. It's coming from whatever you want to call it, heaven, God, so I feel like it's all the same entity. Personally, that we have access to, just in different ritualistic ways.
Right. I agree. Yeah. It's really that's been, I talked a lot about that on my on the episode I did about faith on Project Joy podcast too, was just that, I just over time have felt like everything is coming from the same space. And I feel like we'd be so much farther along in human relations if we all realize that we're more the same in our beliefs than we are different. And so it's a really good point you bring up as well, for people that are like, oh, this is gonna question everything I've ever believed in.
Yeah, I mean, I sat with one of my girlfriends who is just really, really strict Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
We were just like sitting by the fire one night and chatting for a long time, and like Faith came up and we were talking. She was like, wow, I didn't realize how almost exact our belief systems are. And it was just so funny because she's coming from this really strict background, and here I am in a cooler world, and you would think by looking at the surface that she and I are totally different, but our beliefs were almost exactly aligned.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. And it's funny because for me, I made a list of like where I started with all this woo-woo stuff and everything I tried. And you were number one. You're number one on this, baby. Yeah. Started on this path. Anyway, and so I made a list because I wanted to organize for myself and for my clients how I progressed, because it was scary for me. I was like, who do I trust? Where do I put my money? What is this stuff? It was a whole new world for me to navigate. Yeah. So I kind of eased in. Like I started with affirmations and gratitude, and then I moved to Reiki, and then, so I kind of gradually got into more and more woo-woo. So for those people who are a little hesitant, I'll be like, you know what? Here's a book. Read the book. Let me know how it sits with you. Is it too woo-woo? Is it okay? What worked? What didn't? And then we kind of, it's bits and pieces. Like you said, we're all in our own bodies. What worked for me is not going to work for them. So it's just trying out different things and seeing what works.
Right. And I mean, everybody's speed on this journey is so different. And like I have a friend who literally was around me for 2 years, not woo at all. Like no, and not even religious or spiritual, like there was nothing going on in that department. And then all of a sudden after 2 years, she says to me, I'm so positive now. Like I'm such a more positive person. And I think like I've been hanging around with you for like 2 years. And so like, and that's just the first step for her. And then she noticed her husband was being more positive too. And she's like, he's the most negative person. And now I think you rubbed off on me, and now I'm rubbing off on him. And that's like you don't have to label yourself and consider yourself that you follow this certain thing, or that but if you notice those little changes, like, gosh, that's the bee's knees, right?
Yeah. And just like you were talking about labels, I mean, I think that applies to illness, mental illness, physical illness as well, with diagnosis, is that's fine. It can give us a context for understanding ourselves so that we can move forward, but it's not a label, it's not defining us, and that we define ourselves. And that's the thing. It's funny because I feel like this whole process has awakened a little bit of a defiant side in me, I feel like, ooh, I can think outside the box. And that's what it felt like for a while. I felt like I was being defiant, like against this job, And now it doesn't feel that way, of course. It just feels peaceful and so aligned. But
yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at in my journey, is with the label thing, because I don't really have labels for what's been going on with me. And I think it's such a fear for me to get a label, because I know that how my mindset is, that when someone gives me, when I've gotten let me backtrack. I'm stuck in thinking that old Jessica's going to take over, the Jessica that I was 10 years ago, when I would get a diagnosis and think it was the end of the world for me.
correct.
And so now I have this fear that, like, it's almost like I don't trust the growth process that I've been through, and the tools that I have, and all of this other fun stuff. Like, I don't, because I'm so scared to get a diagnosis, because I think that's going to define me. But then I, you know, we think all these things in our head, and then we're like, okay, Jessica, come on now. Come on.
And it's funny, because that's what, like, I went so back and forth with, I hate the medical community.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for them, because they saved my life, you know, and going back and forth with all of that, and being able to really say, I can have both. I can appreciate the medical community and what it offers us, at the same time that I can listen to my own body. It's
Right.
just another piece of information to put on the table for me to make a decision.
Yeah. I love that you said that like that, because I think so many people are black and white, either or. It has to be this or that. I can only choose alternative medicine. I can only choose, you know, allopathic medicine. And it was funny, because I was watching some junk TV recently, and it was one of these Married at First Sight reality shows, and the person that come in had trained, the wife had trained to be a nurse at one time, and she was having serious issues with her shoulder, and she had been to like 3 doctors who had said, you know, you need surgery on the shoulder, period, in her story. And her new husband, which I love this because it brings the drama, because they don't know each other, you know, and so he's in there like, why don't you go to this naturopath and just see what they say? And she was just like, no, this is outside of my, like, I'm not even open to this. So, and he was trying to express to her, like we're talking about, it's just another thought. It's another idea. It's another thing on the table. And I like, imagine the possibilities. You know, our friend Christy Warnick always likes to talk about all the possibilities. What could possibly happen if you had another choice? If you had another, like, what is that harm? What is that, you know? And so I love that you said that, of it just being, it's just another thing on the table. You're not committing and saying, I will never think about surgery again because now I've been to a naturopath. It's not like that, you know?
That's what I encourage in my clients all the time. I'm like, I know your parents say this. I know your mentors say this. I know that school says this or work says this, you know, but you're you. So lay it all out and pick and choose what feels good to you and put it together in a nice little ball and try it out. You know, like, it's all information. All of it.
Yeah. I want to talk about a little elephant in the room for just a minute, because this is something that gets me fired up sometimes. So you're still on a healing journey, and I'm still on a healing journey. And I feel like I'll always be, even if my symptoms, if my physical symptoms were to completely go away, I feel like I would still be working on healing myself emotionally and sort of that, you know, spring cleaning myself all the time. There are people that say that you cannot be a healer and help other people to heal if you are still going through things yourself. What do you say to that?
Mm-hmm. It's so funny that you say that, because I have gone in and out of that, of course, through the journey, where I felt like, who am I to help people if I'm not 100% better? Right. But you could say that about the vast majority of therapists and psychiatrists, first of all.
Right? Let's talk about that.
No, I mean, you know, I wasn't perfect, obviously, before I became a therapist, and I was very effective and helped a lot of people. But for me, and the reason I say I've gone back and forth with this is I'm like, well, I was looking at it black and white. I was like, well, if I'm not 100% better, then energy healing doesn't work. Then spiritual doesn't work. Am I just being diluted? but it's not about that, because when we go to the medical community, do we expect them to heal us to 100%?
I think some people do. I think that's a lot of that is expectation, right?
Exactly. So there's also the fact of our human bodies are shifting and changing all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
We are energetic beings. We are matter, just like everything else. So we're always vibrating, right? We're full of atoms and molecules. So we're always moving and shifting. For me, it's about this journey is about coming to an acceptance and an appreciation of the ebbs and flows of being human, that it's a gift to be here and to be experiencing life with our 5 senses that we don't get to do when we're souls, right? And that we are given certain challenges to be able to learn the lessons that we need to learn for either ourselves or for the collective, right? And so this journey is not about, I have to be perfect before I help other people, but how do you embrace who you fully are? Like with all the stuff that you label as negative to the stuff that you label as neutral or positive, right? But there are no labels. You are you. And how do you embrace and appreciate the fullness of yourself and trust that this unique blueprint that is me is here for a purpose and fills a spot and fills a niche in this universe that is valuable.
Yeah, it's so good. I just, I think, gosh, we can be so hard on ourselves, and even if other people, there's plenty of people who are out there saying what I talked about of it being, not okay for you to think that you can heal other people if you haven't healed yourself and all of that. But then I think a lot of times we're harder on ourselves in that process, and we do go back and forth of saying, what right do I have and to do this when, does it mean it doesn't work? And I think that part of that, is that we're on, everybody's journey is different, first of all. And second, I think that, it's just really important for us to be present and in the moment. And as you were talking about perfection, what I talked about on another interview was that it is about allowing what this present moment right now is to be perfection for us. Like, it's like we're good where we are. And I think, in the spiritual world, there's times when we can be so focused on the past and on the future, like what we want to envision and what do we want to release and all of that. And I always try to bring it back to what's going on right now? Like, what can we be grateful for right now? What can we appreciate about right now? And I think that's so important to stay present in what's going on. But all of that, as we're staying present, what is next for you?
Right. Well, and that's the other thing I was going to say about that as well, which is that just like you said earlier, you attract people that are in alignment with what you're putting out there as well. And so I think intention is very important, but also that I'm going to attract people who I'm further along on my journey than they are on theirs, and so fast forward 10 years, I'm going to be attracting people who are further along on their journey, than they are now. So, so what's next for me is just excitement. I'm excited about next step because, I'm now working entirely virtually, even with my private patients, so I've shifted to that, and I want to continue that. But ideally, my big picture is that I want to open a wellness center locally, continue my virtual work, of course, but I have courses and Akashic certifications that I'm going to be offering in the online space. But I want to open a wellness center and ultimately a charity, because that's what I actually started with wanting to do with this. And when I consulted with someone who gave me the list of everything I had to do to open a charity, I'm like, oh, that's too much for me right now. So that'll be a long-term goal, because I want to raise money for people who have any kind of chronic dis-ease, to be able to afford these alternative treatments, organic food, things that I feel so blessed to have been able to access.
Right. Right. I love that. And I think that's something, you know, that ties into our conversation about the medical community. It is really difficult. And this is not just in the United States, but all over the world. A lot of times the option that is given to you, whether your healthcare is paid for by the government or you're paying for insurance yourself, you know, that rarely includes anything outside of mainstream medicine. It rarely include, and if it does include it, you're paying a lot of money for things like chiropractic and acupuncture and massage. And I mean, granted, some of them include some of that now, but like I said, you're paying a lot more for that. And if you have you know, government insurance, if your government is paying for your healthcare, that's not always an option. And so I think that's something that is really difficult. And I know, like for me, I don't do insurance simply because the majority of my choices are holistic and insurance isn't going to pay for those. Yep. So it's like, you know, am I going to pay for something I'm not going to use kind of thing? You know, so it's interesting, but I love that you're excited about things now and that you're still working on, you know, your own journey and all of that. And I appreciate two things. I appreciate, number one, the gratitude that you have expressed for me being on a part of your journey. I just thank you so much for that, because a lot of times for those of us that we're trying so hard to make a difference in the world, we don't always know. Yeah. We don't always know. And granted, we should be confident in ourselves, yes, but it's so nice to have someone say, you helped me. And so I'm so appreciative of that. And I'm also so just grateful to have been able to see your journey and to see you just helping so many people. I just think we need more people in the world like us that are just trying to make things a better place, you know?
You know, and that we're, you know, we're helping people on all levels. And I think that's what's really important to know, is that, you know, regardless of my physical body or your physical body, I am leagues different and better than I was 3-4 years ago, you know, and being able to really view ourselves holistically at all different levels of awareness.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so thankful that we finally got to sit down and do this, just the two of us. I know Laura was on a panel episode that we did with other people who deal with chronic illness and things like that. And so it's really nice to have this little one-on-one girl time here with you. And so thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, if you want to learn more about what Laura does, where you can find her, she's got an amazing community on Facebook that you can be a part of. And you can also go to her website. So be sure to click the links in the show notes for that. Laura, thanks so much for being with me today. And we'll be back in a minute with more The Breakthrough Show.
Did you know that The Breakthrough Show Facebook page is home to more than just The Breakthrough Show? We've got monthly shows we like to call Breakthrough Extras, with more inspiring content to facilitate your next big breakthrough. Join Crystal Cockerham for one of those extras every third Thursday of the month for Ask Crystal. During this live show, you'll be able to call into the provided number or use the comment section of the video to ask Crystal to chime in and provide guidance on topics like transformation, the divine feminine, the sacred masculine, personal development, spiritual development, and so much more. Find out more information at thebreakthroughshow.com or tune in live this coming Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern at facebook.com/thebreakthroughshow, or find the link in the show notes. And now back to The Breakthrough Show. Welcome back to The Breakthrough Show. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest author today, Will Blaine. Be sure to check out his links on our website to purchase your copy of Vlad and the Vast Beach and Sticky Fingers from Jam. And be sure to stay informed about the release of Brat with a Bat and other stories to come. Also, a super big thank you to our special guest today, Laura Mazzotta. Thank you for sharing your journey and your knowledge with us. I was so thrilled to host you today, my friend. I just appreciate you so much. You can find all the information to connect with Laura on our website, and be sure to check out her free community, Room for Healing, on Facebook. Coming up next week, we have a show filled with all the musical vibes, so you know that I'm going to love that. As we kick off the show, welcoming a songwriter from France, Greg Lennon, who will be chatting about music with us and maybe sharing a song or two. You'll have to tune in to find out. And we've also got an incredible conversation about spirituality with podcaster, performer, and entrepreneur Truth Sika. I'm so excited about sharing this conversation that we had with you guys because it was amazing. So you definitely don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching or listening today. Please take a moment to rate, subscribe, comment, or share where available. And until next week, make it a great time for a breakthrough. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Breakthrough. Please visit our website at www.thebreakthroughshow.com. And be sure to join our After the Breakthrough community powered by Patreon. We look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place for another inspiring episode.